Continuation of Otter. This is called Puzzle. The next day, Otter felt stronger. They wouldn't leave her alone, the animals endlessly feeding and grooming and measuring and testing, as if she were a puzzle they needed to solve. They kept her in a box filled with a tiny piece of ocean. It was long enough for a little swim, wide enough for a twist or a spin, and had a spot above the water for resting. At first, Otter feared their intrusions, but when the animals returned to give her warm food through a piece of rubber with a hole, even though it was never as satisfying as her mother's milk, Otter was grateful for it. Drowning. When she slept, Otter fought the ocean in her dreams, and always the question washed over her until she was sure she would drown in it. Where is she? Where is she? Where is she? Memories. Otter began to recognize each of the animals and even looked forward just a little to their arrival. It wasn't like she had a choice. With every passing hour, it became harder to recall her life before this place. Her mother was warmth. Otter reminded herself she was food, and for a while, at least, she was safety, but already the threads of memory were beginning to fade and unravel. Chow time. Before long, Otter could no longer recall the taste of her mother's milk. It may have been creamier or sweeter than the liquid they brought her every 3 hours, but her stomach didn't seem to know the difference. When the animals were slow to arrive, Otter squeaked and complained, and when her meal finally appeared, she grunted her approval. And they made murmuring, relieved sounds. It was a conversation of a sort. Home away from home. Whatever this strange place was, it was becoming Otter's home away from home. The animals who cared for her were mystifying. Their paws had stubby tentacles, their bodies were practically bald, and their guttural songs hurt her ears. Still, she could not deny that they were kind, and that they seemed, for some unknowable reason, to want her to live. Not otters. They weren't so bad, actually, Otter decided. These animals, with their awkward paws and confusing noises, although nothing they did was quite right, it was right enough. They weren't otters, but they certainly were trying to be. Scents. The first time she noticed the scent, Otter thought she was dreaming. The animals nursing her back to health always carried hints of other places with them. Sometimes it was the brine of salt water, sometimes it was the tang of fresh air, but from time to time she would recognize a scent that was a little like her. It was an ottery smell, rich and reassuring, but she'd seen no other otters there. It was a mystery, but then everything about this new life was a mystery. Who do you think she's smelling, Apollo?
Carrie?
Is Carrie another otter?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Carrie, I think, got bit by the shark too.
Oh, are we going to be introduced to Carrie? Oh, we kind of were in the beginning, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, maybe that's who she's smelling, yeah.
Because I think the shark bit Carrie too, and the shark attacked.
Ah, I
so
see.
Now both of them are there. They just don't know that each other are there.
Ah, all right. Well, this one's called Swimming Lessons. Several times a day, one of the animals would lift Otter out of her box of water and carry her to a bigger round pool, one with sky and sun above it, and breezes tinged with salt or tinged with salt. She floated on her back while they pulled her by her flippers, carving lazy figure eights. Now and then Otter would clutch one of their paws between her own, and the cruise would repeat. Back and forth, as she rode the tiny waves. Whenever Otter was there, she knew she belonged to the water, and it belonged to her. Impossible. When she was happy in the pool, the animals watched her with care, clapping their peculiar paws and revealing their teeth and making breathy noises, and always Otter wondered what it all meant. They were impossible to decipher, these big, clumsy creatures. She would have to watch them carefully until she knew their ways. Perhaps the more she understood, the more she'd be able to get what she needed from them. Maybe she'd find her way back to her life in the wild, although she was no longer certain what that might mean. Would her mother still be waiting for her, or would she have moved on to new places, to new pups? Learning. Even as Otter was learning to navigate her world, her caretakers were learning too. This wasn't their first attempt teaching survival skills to a pup, and it wouldn't be their last. Their plan was simple on paper: at least let 156 explore the ocean with the help of the humans, until she was ready to return to the wild alone. Still, the question kept them up at night. What would 156 need to know on her journey back to freedom? Wouldn't instinct be enough to guide her? So Otter was Otter number 156, huh, Apollo? Yeah. How do you turn a helpless captive pup into a capable wild adult? If only they had a manual, one called How to Teach an Otter Pup, How to Be an Otter Pup. It seemed they were going to have to write it themselves. Mystery. Another question lingered, one without an easy answer. What happened to 156 Mother? They'd searched hard after 156 was discovered, but pups and their mothers were often separated during violent storms. Sometimes with human help they could be reunited, but rescuers couldn't waste time when a stranded pup was in danger of dying. Now, there they were yet again, pretending to be what they never could be: otter moms. Keystones. People often ask them, why try so hard to save one little otter? A look at an old building some time they'd answer, look at an arched door, or maybe a vaulted ceiling. See that wedge-shaped topmost stone? A keystone, that's called, and without it everything falls, like a tower of blocks or a house of cards. It's the same with keystone species: beavers, wolves, prairie dogs, bees, desert tortoises, and sea otters. They are nature's glue, holding habitats together. Without otters, sea urchins, purple as a bruise, gobble kelp forests until the ocean floor becomes a barren wasteland. When enough sea otters eat enough sea urchins, though, all is well, and the ark endures. It sounds so simple, but then so does stacking blocks into towers, and all know how easy it is to topple those towers. We all know how easy it is. Fun. And so they kept at it, pretending to be otters, doing what they could to keep 156 alive and happy. Fortunately, it isn't difficult to entertain an otter pup, and they had quite a bag of tricks at their disposal. Shells and algae, urchins and rocks. Their motto was simple: if it belonged to a wild otter's world, it was worth a try. Car wash kelp. A few otters at the aquarium could never return to the wild, and for them another way to play came from an unexpected source. A large display tank at the aquarium had once featured real kelp, but its otter guests were rowdy, prone to partying, and so the management had to improvise. Instead of living kelp, strands of rough fabric now drifted, the kind at the car wash, sliding over windshields bathed in bubbles. The otters could work with it. They were an adaptable sort, and at the end of the day, play was still play. So it was fake kelp, huh? Riding the waves. For 156 in her little pool, the Aquarius would sometimes dangle a frond of real kelp, so she could grab for it, hanging on while they towed her across the water. Soon she would understand how to use kelp as a pup sitter, just like her mother. Soon she would learn to deep dive, to open mussels, to know which predators to fear. Such a long to-do list it was, and they had so little time. Every hour with humans meant an hour Otter might become more attracted to them. And the more attached she grew, the less willing she might be to find the freedom she deserved. Changes. For Otter, the shells and rocks and outdoor pool were delightful, but just as exciting was the arrival of solid food. One day bits of fishy glop appeared for her consideration. Otter sniffed the tempting goo, ever curious, then took a taste. It was the ocean! Wasn't this how her mother had smelled when she returned from a dive? Otter could no longer recall her mother's touch, but this reminder of life on the waves was still fresh in her heart. She was eating the ocean, and oh my, how delicious it tasted. Coincidence. Otter liked to take food in her paws and make the kind of mess that only determined babies faced with a jar full of cooked peas can create. Interesting coincidence. Once solid food started, her grooming seemed to take a whole lot longer. How to groom an otter pup. How do you groom an otter pup? Carefully. To begin with, be afraid. If you get it wrong, it won't be just another bad hair day. If you get it wrong, she could be lost for otters. Temperature is everything. Be prepared. You'll need towels, so many towels, brushes, little combs, a hairdryer, a boundless patience. Most of all, be grateful. Know how lucky you are to care for this marvel of nature. To witness her contented sighs and watch her perfect curl into slumber. Others. During the first few days at high water, Otter often caught traces of something beyond her simple life, scents lingering on the air, or what sounded like the kind of squeak or hiss that she herself might make. Though she would smell curious things on the animals when they reached for her, and hear curious things when she lay quietly in her cage, every time it happened she told herself to stop thinking that there might be others like her in this not quite home. What point was there in hoping? Milestone. Even before she'd shed her baby coat, Otter's diving lessons began. At first, the Aquarius placed a few cracked clams and mussels in a sand-filled bowl at the bottom of her shallow pool, just a foot or two out of reach. It seemed to frighten poor 156, the way they urged her to explore below the surface. She didn't understand that her ears and nostrils could close at will. She didn't realize that the ocean floor was the ultimate otter restaurant. Diving. It wasn't easy diving, saying farewell to air and light and forcing herself to head toward places unknown. It took all Otter's strength and many tries to talk her flippers and tail and water-wise body into doing exactly what they needed to do. But there it sat, a cracked shell at the bottom of the pool, and inside that shell was a luscious clam. When she finally surfaced, sat the shell on her chest and plucked a tasty snack from its hiding place. The animals, her loyal audience, made sounds that Otter decided meant they were pleased. What do you think sounds they made, Paulo? What sounds do you think they made? Clapping?
Yeah.
Cheering? Hip hip hooray for Otter! Not that she cared, she was too busy slurping down dinner. The surprise. The next morning it was time for another diving lesson, but instead of taking Otter to the outdoor pool she knew so well, the animals carried her to an unfamiliar place. The smells were enticing, and the room echoed with noise, lots of it splashing, bubbling, thumping, squealing. Were those otter scents? Otter sounds? Otter, being Otter, didn't hesitate a moment. She plunged into a huge pool decked out like a miniature ocean. The water had smooth, clear sides. She bumped her nose on invisible walls. Before figuring that out, and it took a while to reach the fairway sandy bottom littered with lovely shells. Small, restless creatures shimmied past, colorful but confusing. Fish, she remembered, learning from her mother, and fronds of fake kelp swayed in a slow-motion hula. But only one thing mattered to Otter, and as she returned to the surface, she had her answer. Welcome. Welcome to the tank, youngster, said a large female, silver-tinged animal, tinged animal, an otter. Surrounded, 2 elderly otters approached her, quite determined to sniff and nudge until they'd assured themselves she belonged with them. Despite her curiosity, Otter felt overwhelmed, surrounded by such nosy strangers. She tried to climb out of the tank to the safety of her little cage, back to the animals who'd brought her, but there was no way out, no ramp or easy exit. They want you in here, explained the smaller female. It's about learning to deep dive. I know how to dive, said Otter. Just wait till you see the ocean, the otter replied. Just a pup. I was born in the ocean, Otter said, circling warily. I wonder if she's permanent, asked the other otter. She had long, thick whiskers and a notch in her flippers. Poor dear, said the smaller female. She looks nervous. Be kind. She's just a pup, Gracie. She turned her gaze on Otter. You're safe with us, little one. Otter swam backward until she rammed the edge of the tank. They call me Holly, said the smaller female, and that's Gracie over there. We've been here forever, Holly said. They decided we weren't fit for the ocean. She gave a toss of her silver head. These days, old and creaky as we are, they're probably right. So they are otters that are there permanently. Listening. Otter scooted here and there, keeping her distance, though she couldn't take her eyes off the 2 otters. And you are? Asked Holly. It took Otter a moment to realize she'd been asked a question. Well, my mother called me Otter, she answered. But what do they call you here? Holly asked. Are you a number or a name? I'm not sure, Otter said. They only name you if you're staying for good, Gracie said, and in a voice that sounded like she'd swallowed a fistful of pebbles. Trust me, it's better to be a number. Escape. Otter dove and darted, leaving a frothy trail in her wake. She had so many questions, and these old otters seemed to have plenty of answers. Still, they made her anxious, with their talk of names and numbers and permanence. After so much time, shouldn't she be happier to be with others like her? It made no sense. She longed for the calm of her cage, her shallow pool, her colorful shells with their secret treats. When the big animals finally allowed her to clamber up a ramp, she ran to them as if they were long-lost family, and she felt at the moment that they were. The humans are her family now. Oh, no! The next step. Every day after that, Otter visited the large tank. Deep dive soon became an effortless joy. While she zipped up and down the tank, perfecting new moves, Otter prepared the others with questions, peppered the otters with questions. They'd seen pups like her come and go before, they said. She was there to learn to dive deeper than her usual spot allowed. The pup pool, they called it. Before long, though, Otter would probably be promoted, moved on to the next step, the ocean. Ready. The very idea of returning to life in the wild filled Otter with a dizzying mix of yearning and dread. "Are you sure?" she asked them. "Why didn't they send you back?" "We couldn't have survived," Gracie answered, "or so they thought. There are many reasons. Sometimes we're too weak or too attached to life here." She paused. "Sometimes we try to return and the ocean simply spits us back." "What if I'm not ready for the ocean?" Otter asked. Spinning and rolling. "What if the animals are wrong?" "Humans." "Animals?" Gracie repeated, sounding amused. "Those animals are called humans, my dear," Holly said. "How do you know?" Otter asked, toying with a ripply brown shell she found on the tank floor. "If you listen long enough, you learn things," Gracie said, "whether you want to or not." Warning. A memory came back to Otter, a warning shrouded in ocean mist. Stay away from sharks, stay away from humans, stay away from all that you don't understand. More questions poured out, one after another. Should I be afraid of humans? And why would my mother have told me that? And what exactly is a shark? There were sharks in high water, the otters told her, but they lived in their own tanks, and Gracie claimed weren't nearly as popular with the visitors as the otters. Her mother was just doing her job, they said, teaching Otter to survive. As for being afraid of humans, that was a bit more complicated. The ones here, at least, were good-hearted. Beyond these stubborn walls of impassable water, though, who could say? Let's leave it there for tonight, okay, Apollo?
Okay.
Adios!
Bye.